Welcome to Fragile Bonds, to the powerful stories of family, love, loss, and the choices that shape our lives. Now let's begin today's story.
My name is Rachel Harris. I work as a nurse at a local hospital in the suburbs of Ohio. I live in a small apartment with my 4-year-old daughter, Emma. It's not spacious by any means, but this room filled with Emma's laughter is our special place. At 7 in the morning, Emma wakes me up by peering into my face. Even though I'm rubbing my sleepy eyes after a night shift, seeing my daughter's smile naturally lifts my spirits. Breakfast is simple: cereal and milk. Emma tries so hard to use her spoon, even though she spills milk everywhere. That little gesture is unbearably precious to me. Life as a single mother is far from easy. With so many night shifts, I struggle every day to balance work and raising Emma. But every time I see Emma sleeping peacefully, I think I can do anything for this child. Emma is a bright, active girl, and her daycare teacher always tells me she's so full of energy all the time. Those words are the greatest encouragement I could ask for. My mother, Barbara, lives alone. She lives about a 30-minute drive away, and when I have night shifts, she often takes care of Emma for me. I'm truly grateful, and it's such a help. But to be honest, my relationship with my mother is a bit complicated. I'm sure my mother worries about me, but her words always come across as nagging. Today, too, when I brought Emma over, my mother said with a somewhat stern expression, "Another night shift. That poor child." My mother's words stung. I know. But there's nothing I can do about it. I can't help it. I have to make a living. My response might have sounded a little cold. My mother said nothing and just sighed. These exchanges have become routine lately. I wish we could understand each other better. But somehow I feel a wall between us. Emma loved her grandmother's house. My mother's house has a big yard that my apartment doesn't have, and lots of picture books. As soon as Emma entered the front door, she shouted happily, "I love Grandma's house." My mother's expression softened for a moment. In front of Emma, my mother always becomes a gentle grandmother. "Drive carefully," my mother said to me. I patted Emma's head and turned back to my mother. "Call me if anything happens during the night." "I know. You don't have to tell me every time." My mother's reply was a bit curt. I nodded slightly and left the house. As I got in my car, I felt the distance between my mother and me again. But I don't have time to think about that now. I need to focus on work. This was just an ordinary drop-off, nothing special. At that moment, I never imagined for a second that something extraordinary would happen. When I arrived at the hospital, my colleague Jennifer greeted me with a smile. As I changed into my white coat in the locker room, she started talking to me. "Emma's at your mom's house again today." "Yes, I'm always grateful for her help," I answered with a forced smile. The truth is my feelings are complicated, but I was reluctant to talk about it with others. The night shift began. The hospital hallway at 10 p.m. was completely silent. During night shift hours, the daytime bustle becomes eerily quiet. Most of the patients are asleep, and nurses make their rounds quietly. I was in charge of the third-floor ward, and at this time my work mainly consisted of checking patients' charts and recording vital signs. Looking out the hallway window, I could see street lights lined up regularly. October nights in Ohio are cold, and the window pane was slightly fogged up. I reached out and wiped the glass. When I returned to the nurse's station, the senior nurse Margaret was making hot coffee. She's a veteran who has been working at this hospital for over 20 years. "Rachel, want some coffee?" "Thanks, I'll take some." I received the coffee poured into a paper cup and took a sip. The warmth passed through my throat and spread through my body. This coffee is essential for getting through the long night shift hours. Margaret sat down next to me and smiled gently. "Emma's at your mom's place again today." "Yes." My mother always helps me out, so I'm really grateful. I answered honestly. But somewhere in my heart, something was bothering me. Perhaps Margaret sensed this, as she tilted her head slightly. Your mom is so cooperative. My mother would never watch her grandchild, not in a million years. Yes, my mother really does a lot for me. I was vague with my words. It's true that my mother helps me. But every time, she makes critical comments. I feel like she doesn't accept the way I live my life. It's as if she's telling me I'm a bad mother. Margaret asked casually as she drank her coffee. But it must be tough sometimes. Raising a child alone. I'm used to it. It's been 2 years now. 2 years. Has it really been that long since the divorce? Time flies. Are you still in touch with Emma's father? Margaret's question made me hesitate for a moment. This was a topic I wanted to avoid if possible. But she didn't mean anything bad by asking. It's just small talk. No. I haven't seen him since the divorce. I see, not even visitation. No. He doesn't reach out, and I don't particularly either. I didn't elaborate further. When I think about Mark, complex emotions well up. Anger, sadness, and a bit of fear. But I'm not close enough to anyone here to talk about it. Margaret seemed to sense that I didn't want to talk about it and changed the subject. By the way, did you hear about next week's schedule change? No, I haven't heard yet. We returned to work talk and finished our coffee. Margaret headed to the opposite ward on the 3rd floor, and I started making my rounds of the patients again. Looking at the clock, it was past 11 p.m. Emma must be fast asleep at my mother's house by now. At my mother's house, there's Emma's favorite stuffed animal. It's a rabbit stuffed animal that Emma named Bunny. Tonight too, she must be sleeping peacefully, holding Bunny tight. Thinking about this warmed my heart a little. No matter how awkward things are between my mother and me, my mother's presence is important to Emma. That much is certain. After midnight, the hospital became even quieter. Even footsteps in the hallway echoed. I made my rounds to each patient room, checking on them. Is their breathing stable? Is the floor dripping properly? Are they complaining of pain? I checked each person carefully. 1 a.m. When I returned to the nurse's station, Caitlin was organizing paperwork. She still didn't seem used to night shifts. Is this the right way to write this record? I looked over her shoulder at the chart. Yes, that's fine. But here, you should write the time in more detail. Got it, thank you. Caitlin started making corrections seriously. I sat down at my desk and began clearing the paperwork that had piled up. Patient progress notes, medication administration records, reports to doctors. There's surprisingly a lot of paperwork to do during night shifts. Sleepiness was overtaking me. I yawned quietly and rubbed my eyes. I thought about having another cup of coffee, but too much caffeine isn't good either. In the morning, I have to pick up Emma. Before that, I want to get at least a little nap. Break time is coming up soon. I muttered as if to myself. The clock hand pointed to 1:30 a.m. In another 30 minutes, I can start my 2-hour break. If I lie down for a bit during that time, I can get through the rest of the night shift. Looking out the window, the city had completely fallen asleep. At this hour, the only people awake are people like us working at the hospital, or people with some special circumstances. Emma's sleeping face floated into my mind. Her soft cheeks, long eyelashes, small hands. In the morning, I'll get to see that smile. Looking forward to that, I'll do my best tonight. I turned back to my paperwork. As I moved my pen across the page, I was grateful for this peaceful night with nothing happening. The patients were stable too, with no particular problems. A quiet night shift like this is ideal for a nurse. From down the hallway, I could hear Margaret's footsteps. She waved at me slightly and returned to her post. Silence returned. Only the sound of the clock's second hand ticking echoed in the nurse's station. I turned the papers one by one, filling them out matter-of-factly. As I moved my pen, I felt a little relieved thinking that break time was coming soon. That's when it happened. The smartphone in my pocket vibrated. A phone call at this hour? I was momentarily confused as I looked at the screen. It displayed, unknown number. My heart skipped a beat. Getting a call from an unknown number in the middle of the night isn't normal. A premonition that something bad had happened crossed my mind. Hello? I pressed the call button with trembling fingers. Is this Rachel Harris? What came through the phone was a low, calm male voice. From the tone of that voice, I immediately knew it was an official call. Yes, but... My voice was trembling too. My heart was pounding violently, and I was having trouble breathing. This is the Ohio State Police. You need to come to your daughter immediately. She's at Memorial Hospital. My mind went blank. My daughter. Emma. Memorial Hospital. That's the hospital I'm at right now. But Emma should be at my mother's house. What's going on? I can't understand. What? But my daughter is at my mother's house, she should be staying at my mother's house. My voice was shrill. Confused and frightened, I didn't even know what I was saying anymore. We'll explain the details at the hospital. Please come right away. The police officer's voice said nothing more. The call ended. I stood up. My knees were shaking, and I could barely stand. Caitlin looked at me with a surprised expression. Rachel, what's wrong? Your face. Emma. Emma's at the hospital. I interrupted her words and ran toward Margaret. As I ran down the hallway, tears overflowed. I didn't know what had happened. Only the fact that something had happened to Emma dominated my mind. When I explained the situation to Margaret, she understood immediately. Go, Rachel. We'll handle things here. Thank you. I grabbed my things from my locker and ran from the back exit of the hospital to the parking lot. I got in my car and started the engine. My hands were shaking so much I couldn't turn the key. I took a deep breath and finally the engine started. 2:15 a.m. I pressed the accelerator. The emergency department is at the front of the hospital. Since I usually use the staff entrance at the back, it had been a while since I'd gone around to the front. As I drove, tears wouldn't stop. My hands gripping the steering wheel were shaking, and my vision was blurry. Emma, Emma. I shouted my daughter's name. In the car, in a voice no one could hear. What happened? An injury? An accident? Or illness? The more I thought about it, the more worst-case scenarios crossed my mind. The light turned red. Even while waiting, my legs kept shaking. At this intersection in the middle of the night where no one else was passing through, I was waiting at a red light. Time felt like an eternity. The moment it turned green, I pressed the accelerator. The distance to the hospital should be short, but tonight it felt like it was in a faraway place. I tried calling my mother. I operated my smartphone with trembling fingers. But it wouldn't connect. No matter how many times I called, there was no answer. This too amplified my anxiety. Had something happened to my mother? And Emma? Both of them? Please, please. I muttered as if praying. I'd never believed in God, but at this moment, I prayed desperately. Please let Emma be safe. Please, please. Finally, the front entrance of the hospital came into view. The red sign for the emergency department was glowing in the darkness. That light looked ominous tonight. At the entrance, 2 patrol cars were parked. The emergency lights were off, but their presence spoke to the seriousness of the situation. Two uniformed police officers were standing near the entrance. I jumped out of my car and ran toward them. My daughter. Where is my daughter? My voice was cracking. One of the police officers approached me and held out his hand. Please calm down. Your daughter is safe. Safe. At those words, I nearly lost the strength in my knees. Safe. Emma is safe. But then why is she at the hospital? Why are the police here? Questions swirled in my head. But what happened? Why is Emma here? I grabbed the police officer's arm. He made a troubled expression and exchanged glances with the other officer. We'll explain in detail inside. This way, please. Led by the police officer, I entered the emergency department waiting room. The place where I usually work as staff looked completely different tonight. Another police officer approached with papers in hand. Ms. Harris, please sit down. I can't sit down. Let me see my daughter. I shouted. But the police officer kept his calm expression and placed his hand on my shoulder. You'll see her soon. But first, let me explain the situation. I had no choice but to sit down in a waiting room chair. My whole body was trembling. The police officer sat across from me and opened his mouth with a serious expression. First, Emma is safe. She has no external injuries. At those words, I felt a little relieved. But my anxiety hadn't disappeared yet. There was an intrusion incident at your mother Barbara Harris's home tonight. Intrusion. My mother. Where is my mother? I started to stand up, but the police officer held me back with his hand. Your mother is also at this hospital now. She's receiving treatment in another room. Treatment? Does that mean my mother was injured? My head was confused. What do you mean? What on earth happened? The police officer paused for a moment, as if choosing his words. That silence made me even more anxious. Around 1 a.m., an intruder broke into your mother's house. Your mother resisted violently and was injured in the process. An intruder. Who? My voice was hoarse. The police officer looked into my eyes and stated clearly. Your ex-husband, Mark Thompson. The moment I heard that name, I felt like the world had stopped. Mark. My ex-husband. Emma's father. Mark. I couldn't believe it. No, deep down, part of me had thought he might do something. But I never thought it would really happen. Did he try to take Emma? I asked in a trembling voice. The police officer nodded quietly. Yes. Your mother protected your daughter. She resisted violently, and in the process sustained injuries to her head and arm. Tears overflowed. My mother. That mother of mine had fought to protect Emma. A neighbor heard the screaming and called 911. When we arrived, Thompson was still in the house and was arrested on the spot. I covered my face and cried. Emma, if my mother hadn't protected her at that moment. Just thinking about it was terrifying. Please, let me see my daughter. The police officer nodded and stood up. This way. I was led into a small examination room. Emma was there. Being held by a nurse, her small body was trembling. Mommy. When Emma saw me, she cried out. I ran and hugged Emma tight. Her small body was trembling in my arms. Emma. Are you okay? Are you hurt? I checked my daughter's whole body. Arms, legs, face, head. There were no noticeable injuries anywhere. But Emma's eyes were wide open with fear. Mommy. I was so scared. It's okay now, Mommy's here. I held Emma tight. I almost lost this child. If it weren't for my mother, by now Emma would be. Just thinking about it made my body tremble. The nurse spoke gently. Physically, she's fine. But she's quite shocked, so please watch her carefully for a while. I nodded over and over. Then I asked the police officer. My mother, where is my mother? Third floor patient room. I'll show you. Still holding Emma, I followed the police officer. I had to see my mother. I had to thank her. And I had to apologize for my attitude all this time. The elevator doors opened onto the third floor hallway. I followed the police officer, still holding Emma in my arms. The hallway was dimly lit and silent. This is a place where I normally work as a nurse, but tonight it looks completely different. The police officer explained as we walked. Your mother has a head injury and a broken right arm. However, her life is not in danger. She's fully conscious. I felt a little relieved at those words, but the fact that my mother was injured pierced my heart. It's my fault. Marrying Mark, divorcing him, all of it was my life choice. And yet my mother was injured protecting Emma. We arrived at the patient room. Room 305. At the door, I took a deep breath. Emma was still trembling slightly in my arms. Emma, let's go see Grandma. I spoke gently. Emma nodded slightly. The police officer knocked on the door and called inside. Then he showed us in. When I entered the room, I saw my mother lying in bed. White bandages were wrapped around her head, and her right arm was in a cast. But my mother's eyes were open, looking at us. Mom. My voice trembled. My mother smiled weakly. Rachel, you came. That voice was weaker than usual, but it was definitely my mother's voice. Still holding Emma, I approached the bedside. The nurse spoke gently. Just a little while is okay. But don't stay too long. I nodded and said to the nurse. Could you watch Emma for a bit? I want to talk with my mother alone. The nurse nodded kindly and took Emma. Emma looked at me anxiously, but when I smiled at her, she let herself be held by the nurse obediently. I'll be right back, wait for me. The police officer and nurse took Emma and left the room. The door closed, leaving just my mother and me. I sat in the chair by the bed. I couldn't look directly at my mother's face. I felt crushed by guilt. Mom, I'm so sorry. Tears overflowed from my eyes. My mother reached out with her left hand and held mine. Rachel, this isn't something you need to apologize for. But Mark is my ex-husband, if only I had listened to your advice. The words wouldn't continue. My mother gently squeezed my hand. Rachel, I'm the one who should be sorry. At those words, I looked up. Tears were forming in my mother's eyes too. Do you remember when I opposed your divorce? I nodded. I'll never forget that time. When I decided to divorce Mark, my mother initially opposed it. I saw through Mark's true nature. From the time you first started dating him. I caught my breath at my mother's confession. But you wouldn't listen to me. In fact, you thought I just didn't like him. That was true. Back then, I thought my mother simply didn't want to accept my choice. When you decided to marry him, I desperately tried to stop you. But you wouldn't listen. My mother's voice trembled. So I decided to respect your judgment. I thought as a mother, I had to accept my adult daughter's choice. Mom. But in the end, you were hurt. Just as I'd predicted. And I could never forgive myself for that. My mother stared at the ceiling. I blamed myself. Why didn't I stop you more forcefully? Why couldn't I protect you? I squeezed my mother's hand hard. My mother had been thinking about me like this all along. Even after the divorce, I was harsh with you. Saying you were working too many night shifts and making Emma feel lonely. Mom, that's... But the truth is I knew how hard you were working. The difficulty of raising a daughter on your own as a single mother. My mother turned toward me. It's just that honest words wouldn't come out of my mouth. Instead of expressing love, I said critical things. Tears wouldn't stop. I felt like I was learning my mother's true feelings for the first time. And then my mother continued further. Rachel, actually, after your divorce, I was monitoring Mark. What? At those unexpected words, my eyes widened. I was secretly taking measures to make sure he didn't get close to you. My mother's confession continued. Did you know that Mark got out of prison 6 months ago? I shook my head. I didn't know. I didn't even know Mark had been in prison. He committed assault and served a year. After his release, I was tracking his movements. My mother sighed deeply. That's why I upgraded the home security system. That's why I installed security cameras. I had thought that was just regular security measures. I never imagined it was in preparation for Mark. I also asked my neighbor Edna to call the police right away if anything suspicious happened. Ms. Edna, a woman in her 70s who lives next to my mother. She's always doing yard work and greets me kindly. Tonight too, Edna called 911. She saved us. My mother's voice was full of gratitude. The police officer came back into the room. Ms. Harris, let me add some information. He continued explaining to me. Without your mother's preparations, tonight would have had a much worse outcome. The security camera footage became decisive evidence, and Thompson was arrested in the act. He's now in custody. He'll be charged with attempted kidnapping, breaking and entering, and assault. The police officer's words entered my ears. Your mother's courageous actions protected your daughter. I looked at my mother. My mother was smiling weakly. Mom, you've been protecting us all along. I stood up and leaned against my mother's bed, crying. I thought you were just nagging. That you were interfering in my life. I'm so sorry. I'm truly sorry. My mother stroked my head with her left hand. It's all right, Rachel. I was the one who communicated wrong. From now on, let's talk more honestly. I lifted my face and looked into my mother's eyes. Yes. And thank you for protecting Emma. You really are, you're a wonderful mother. We hugged each other and cried. I felt years of accumulated misunderstandings melting away in this moment. The door was knocked on, and the nurse came in with Emma. Grandma. Emma left my arms and rushed to the bed. My mother gently patted Emma's head. Emma, you were scared, weren't you? But it's all okay now. Grandma, does it hurt? Just a little. But because Emma's doing well, Grandma is happy. I watched the two of them and wiped my tears. This is family, I truly thought. It's not just blood ties. Supporting and protecting each other in times of trouble. That's what real family is. The nurse spoke gently. It's time to let your mother rest now. I nodded and picked up Emma. Mom, I'll come again in the morning. Rest well. Thank you, Rachel. Take good care of Emma. Of course. And next time, it's my turn to protect you. My mother smiled and closed her eyes. We quietly left the room. As we walked down the hallway, Emma said, Mommy, Grandma was so strong. Yes. Grandma is a really strong person. I hugged Emma. I was truly grateful to my mother for protecting this child. A week passed. My mother was discharged safely and came to recuperate at my apartment. She was originally planning to go back to her own house, but since that incident, my mother had been hesitant to return to that house. I didn't hesitate to take my mother in. It's a small apartment, but it was enough for the three of us to live together. I adjusted my work schedule to get more day shifts when possible. to take care of my mother, and so Emma wouldn't feel lonely alone at night. My colleagues at the hospital understood the situation and cooperated. Emma was gradually getting her smile back. The first few days she woke up from nightmares in the middle of the night, but she seemed comforted when my mother and I were nearby, and now she could sleep soundly. Sitting on the living room sofa, my mother and I drank coffee together. Emma was reading a picture book in the next room. It was a peaceful afternoon. "Rachel, about Mark's trial." My mother quietly brought it up. I nodded. "I got a call from the lawyer. He's been charged with attempted kidnapping, breaking and entering, and assault, and there's a high possibility of a prison sentence." "I see." My mother held my hand. "A restraining order has been issued too. He'll never be able to come near you again." I sighed with relief. Mark would no longer be involved in our lives. That was the most comforting thing of all. A few days later, I got an official call from the lawyer. Mark received a 5-year prison sentence. He was fired from his job and disowned by his own family. His visitation rights to Emma were completely revoked. I thought it was what he deserved. It was the result of the path he chose. About 2 months later, I made a suggestion to my mother. "Mom, why don't you just keep living with us?" My mother looked surprised. "But your life, won't it be cramped with me here?" I shook my head. "We're family, so I want to be together. And Emma's happy when you're here." Tears welled up in my mother's eyes. "Are you sure?" "Of course, Mom." We hugged each other. And we decided to move to a bigger apartment together, all 3 of us. The new place was an apartment with 3 bedrooms. Emma's room, my room, and my mother's room. The living room was spacious, with sunlight streaming through large windows. We hung a photo of the 3 of us smiling on the wall. "This is our real family." My mother said that and smiled. 4 months later, Thanksgiving Day arrived. In the kitchen, my mother and I were preparing the turkey. Emma was standing on a step stool, working hard to help. "Grandma, is this okay?" Emma asked as she put vegetables in a small bowl. "Perfect, Emma. Thank you." My mother answered gently. I watched the 2 of them and felt happy. This is real family time. When I murmured this, my mother turned around and smiled. It really is. In the evening, the dishes were laid out on the table. Turkey, mashed potatoes, green beans, cranberry sauce. It was a Thanksgiving dinner that the 3 of us had created together. We sat around the table and held hands. My mother said quietly, "I'm thankful for this family." Emma said happily, "I love you, Mommy and Grandma." I looked at them both and said from my heart, "Let's always be together." Outside the window, snow was beginning to fall. Ohio's winter was arriving. The fireplace warmed us gently. Emma's laughter echoed through the room, and my mother's peaceful smile was there. Family isn't just about blood ties. It's about supporting and protecting each other in difficult times. And being connected by unconditional love. We learned the true meaning of family. And I understood the depth of my mother's love. Here was our real family.